Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today on the Forecasting to Farm webinar presented as part of the Queensland Farmers Federation Farm Business Resilience Program. Today's webinar is jointly funded by the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund and the Queensland Government Drought and Climate Adaptation Program. My name is Beck. I'm the Project Officer managing the delivery of the Farm Business Resilience Program, and joining me from the QFF team are Kerry Battersby and Julia Jergs. I potentially thought that we may have also had a little sneaky pop in from our QFF president, Aaron Kiley, but it looks like maybe he's stuck out on farm. So he's might be joining us later as a participant as well. So you're all here today to hear from those who are experts in taking sometimes what is a bit of a dark art, the art of forecasting, and applying it in a practical sense to inform on-farm decision-making and risk management. With us today, we have Andrew Maclean, the Agricultural Customer Lead from the Bureau of Meteorology, who will run us through the most common tools from the Bureau used in on-farm decision-making. And then later on, we will hear from Dermot Pascoe and Ian Moss from Farm Agronomy to expand on some examples of how these tools are used in a practical sense. You'll notice that we've disabled the chat function in the webinar, but please feel free to use the Q&A function. You can comment on other people's questions, upvote them. It just helps us keep all the questions in one place so we don't miss them. Other than that, I think that's all from me. I'll hand over to Andrew to begin his presentation. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Beck. I'll just share my screen. And I'm hoping that you will wave at me, Beck, to indicate that that has worked. That's great. Okay, so today I want to just basically focus on some of the, as Beck said, on some of the primary forecasting tools that the Bureau provides, and just give you some tips about how to make the best use of those. So this is basically the outline that I want to go through. I always like to offer a quick introduction of who we are, so you know who you're talking to. Despite the focus of the presentation, I'll just go quickly through a few slides that review where we've been over the last few months in Queensland. I want to talk briefly about how we construct our forecast and what we mean by an ensemble forecast. Then we'll have a look at the seasonal outlooks for Queensland for the next few months. But really the primary purpose of this presentation is the last point, which is to look at three of our important forecasting tools that I hope you'll be able to use to good effect in your decision making. So this is us. We're the Bureau of Meteorology Agriculture team. We're a small team, and we became a bit smaller a week or so ago. Some of you may know Alistair Hawksford, who for many years led our work with agriculture. He's the missing guy in the bottom right-hand corner here. But the rest of us are there as listed. Now, my colleague Rachel on Friday offered her assistance in the delivery of this presentation, and I said, perhaps if you want to join in for a giggle, you could. And I see that she has. So Rachel's with us today as well. So thanks for joining in, Rachel. So Rachel focuses on horticulture as she's based in Brisbane. My focus is on livestock. Michaela there in the canola with her dog focuses on broadacre, and Jamie on the top left focuses on just more general customer support and support for the team. We love getting emails from our farming customers, so don't ever be shy if you have a question about any of our services or products. Send us an email, and we always like the interaction, the opportunity to explain what's going on. Oh, and that's me in the top right-hand corner. So just looking backwards very quickly, Queensland's had a pretty good season if rain is your thing. So from March to May 2025, these maps are only updated to the end of the month, so I can't give you one to date, but this is what the 3 months ending at the end of May looks like. and it shows that rainfall across Queensland exceeded the long-term average almost everywhere. And of course, if you're out in central Queensland, it exceeded it by a lot and led to that very serious flooding we saw in southwest Queensland. The one area that stands out as not being above median is the wet tropics, ironically enough. It's had a good deal less rain than normal, but prior to that, it had a very wet season. So I imagine those of you up there on the tropical coast might be pleased for the opportunity to dry out a little bit. And then there's a patch here around about the sort of the inland southeast that is a bit below median. If you represent that in a statistical sense, when I prepared this slide, I said no part of Queensland received lower than the average rainfall over the last 3 months. But then I noticed there's this tiny little spot here that did. But otherwise, everyone got at least average to above average rainfall. And of course, in this inland area, it was a record high. It was the highest ever received. And this, of course, leads to a pretty good picture for soil moisture. So this is the Australian Water Outlook product that's available on our website. This gives a modelled indication of soil moisture. It takes into account rainfall, obviously, and soil type and evapotranspiration, all those other sorts of factors that affect soil moisture, and presents this. Now, you don't want to use this at the individual farm scale, but it does give you a sort of a big picture look about where soil moisture is. And you can see above average to above average everywhere, the blue being above average, and just these little pockets around here that now have fallen below average on the Queensland wet tropical coast. This isn't a Bureau product. This is provided to us by the Americans, so enjoy it while it lasts. It's the sort of thing that's struggling a bit with their budget position. But this is showing that in NVDI, isn't it? There's basically a satellite image of green vegetation. And what it's showing is that in the graph at the bottom, the red line is the current situation. The black line is the average from 2001 to 2023, and the grey lines are the minimum to the maximum during that same period. So that's showing that across the whole state, Queensland is tracking way above the highest amount, the highest level that's been observed in the 20 years to 2023. So it's a pretty good season. There's a clear bias towards the inland here. It doesn't seem to be quite so green along the coast, but that's a pretty impressive outcome as a consequence of that rain. So now turning from looking over our shoulder to looking ahead, this is showing that you can expect a 60 to 75% chance that rainfall will be above median from July to September. But I want to really stress a few points. I'm going to keep banging this drum as I talk today. This isn't a map of rainfall. This is a map of probabilities. So this is showing that rainfall in Queensland will have a higher than normal probability of it being above the long-term median. But that doesn't mean it's going to rain a lot, because in the background, of course, this is the dry season. So up around Mount Isa and Birdsville and places like that, the long-term average rainfall is very, very low. So it doesn't take very much to get a nice green colour on this map during the dry season in Queensland and the Northern Territory. You'll see down here in Tasmania, it's showing a lower chance of above median rainfall, but you can be pretty certain there'll be a lot more rain happening in eastern Tasmania in the next few months than there will be around Mount Isa. So you just need to understand these maps aren't maps of rainfall, they're maps of the probability of rainfall. Another point we like to make is that sometimes we're a bit reluctant to share slides after these presentations, because these maps are updated weekly. So this is the Outlook issued on the 5th of June, so that's last Thursday. There'll be a new one issued this Thursday, so it's important to keep an eye on things because they change as we go, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. This is another way of looking at the same data that zeroes into the chance of unusually wet conditions, unusually high rainfall. So this is showing that the probability that rainfall will be in the highest 20% of historical records. Now, the logic is that the chance of getting rainfall in the highest 20% of records is 20%, so we're comparing it to that 20% figure. And we can see a large part of southeast Queensland, our models are predicting that there's a 30 to 50% chance of rainfall in that top 20% range, which is 1.5 to 2.5 times as likely as the long term. So that's pointing towards a reasonably good proposition for good rainfall in the southern Queensland region in that period. Now I'm going to get into a whole lot of talking about percentages I already have, and I want to talk a bit about, just very quickly, about how we construct our forecasts. The starting point is a grid that covers the Earth's surface and also goes upwards. It's a three-dimensional grid, a grid of cubes. I'm not quite sure what the technical term for that would be. So there's multiple layers going up into the atmosphere, and we collect observations about the prevailing weather conditions in each of those little cubes, and we derive that from weather stations, we derive it from satellites, we derive it from weather balloons and all sorts of methods like that. And that is the input into these models. The model Australia runs is called Access, and that's a really complicated model that basically draws upon the basic physical, the laws of physics, and the ones we learnt in high school, physics and chemistry, Boyle's law and all those sorts of things that talk about the way the atmosphere, the way gas will behave in terms of changes in temperature and changes in pressure. All those complex calculations go into the model. The model's run multiple times, so the long-range forecast we'll be talking about is run 99 times, and that gives us our outputs, and the outputs are a prediction of the various meteorological phenomena on a time scale, so it could be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months ahead, or 1 day, 2 days, 3 days ahead, depending on the model. Geography, of course, where is it going to be warm, where is it going to be wet, and the various phenomena, rain, wind, temperature, and all the rest. And we monitor those outputs against our observations, particularly in the short term, the weekly scale models, and we'll make adjustments as the week goes ahead to make sure that the model is giving us the best prediction it can. And then we have a challenge of communication. So we need to present products that are suitable for the general public and for specialist users, so aviation and operations like that need specialised forecast products. And we go out with multiple communication channels, many more than we used to. It used to be in the weekly rural newspaper, you get one forecast a week. Now we're giving 2 forecasts a day, and we'll shortly be moving to 4 forecasts a day, online, through radio, on the web, all sorts of places like that, through the app, of course, is a very popular product. The reason I want to talk about that is I'll go back to this multiple model runs. There's always uncertainty in the initial conditions, so the model is run with what they slightly adjust the input data. They call that they perturb it, and they do that in a structured way. So not every model run is identical. They're all attempting to sort out the same problem about what the weather's going to do and where, but they generate 99 what are called ensembles. So the ensemble has 99 members. Each model run is a member. And just to give you a visual picture about that, this is an image showing cyclone tracks back a few months ago. You see Alfred, which many in Queensland will be very familiar with, and a couple of cyclones that were running at the same time in the southeast Indian Ocean. Each of these lines is an ensemble member of the cyclone forecast. You can see here Cyclone Jude, they are all lumped together really tightly. So we can have a fair bit of confidence about where Cyclone Jude is likely to be going. The model's got all the results are pointing in the same direction for Cyclone Jude. But with Alfred, you recall it came down the coast and then did a sharp right-hand turn. The model is the ensemble members are spread much more widely, so it's a bit hard to have the same confidence in that forecast as we did for Cyclone Jude. We're not here today to talk about cyclone forecasts. So the point about putting this up is it just shows how just gives you a visual representation of how ensembles are used to generate a prediction about the future weather. So for Jude, you could draw a pretty confident black line down the middle and say the average of our ensembles is going that way. But for Alfred, it was a bit less certain. Our guys did a pretty good job in the end, but it was a more difficult job. So let's move on to the tools. There's three that I want to present to you. One for next week, one for the season ahead, and then for the changing climate in your district. So MetEye is the tool we recommend for the 7-day outlook. And the great thing about MetEye, I think, is that it provides a forecast for everywhere in Australia. Once upon a time, if you lived, I've just randomly selected Roma for this example. If you lived down at Scrubby Creek, about 50 kilometres from Roma, you probably had to rely on the Roma forecast to get an indication of what's going on in your place. But with MetEye, we can actually get a forecast for your location. I'm about to show you how to do that. So now I'm going to leap off into internet land, Beck. So let's hope this works. Give me a wave. Has that come up?
Yep, looks good.
You're seeing MetEye? Okay, thanks. So this is where you'll start with MetEye. I've gone straight to it. I'll very quickly go backwards here though. Here's our Bureau webpage and here's MetEye. It starts with the wind forecast. We'll be mostly interested in rainfall and we'll start there. Now, inconveniently for me, Queensland's pretty dry at the moment, so I'm actually going to look at some examples down in the southeast where it's raining a lot. I'm in Melbourne today and it's been raining a lot this morning. So what it does, firstly, in a 3-hourly basis, is giving you a chance of any rain in the next 3 hours. Let's say, let's stick with Melbourne because that's where I'm sitting. That's showing there is a 75 to 90% chance of rainfall in the next 3 hours. Now I look out the window, look at the clouds, and I reckon I can back up that forecast. It's probably quite likely. But then we have the question of how much rain might fall. So starting at 50%, zooming in a bit, so 50% chance. 50% of our ensemble members in this model came out saying that you could expect 0.5 to 1 millimetres in the next 3 hours. The 25% chance this is a bit hard to get your head around. Essentially, that's saying 75% of the ensemble members came and said that we can expect 1 to 2 millimetres in the next 3 hours. And if you're a real gambler, the 10% chance, we don't often use this forecast, is that we'll get, what's this? It must be 3 to 5 millimetres in the next 3 hours. And you can see this all changes as we go. We can do the same for daily rainfall. This goes to tomorrow. So it's the 50% chance that tomorrow Melbourne's going to get 1 to 5 millimetres. Now, I go back, I'm still hoping to give you a good example from Queensland, but no, not much rain forecast for Queensland tomorrow. And the 25% chance likewise. The lower the percentage chance, the higher the rainfall is going to be. And then the chance of any rain tomorrow, zooming in here, in far east Gippsland, east of Orbost, it's predicting a 90 to 100% chance of any rain. Any rain means 0.2 millimetres. The great gift of this tool is that you can search on a particular location. When I'm doing these things, I'm never quite sure which location to pick, but I'm going to pick a place called Tilden that you may have never heard of. It's where my mum grew up. So Tilden's up in the just northwest of Melbourne. You click on Tilden, up pops this daily forecast, and then you can pick on the detail, and you'll get a 3-hourly forecast for tomorrow. You can see Tilden's a pretty chilly place. Its forecast tomorrow is only for 11 degrees. 40% chance of rain. The predicted range of rainfall is 0 to 1 millimetres. We talked about grid squares. Here's an example of a little grid square. There's one there, there's one there. So the forecast for this grid is different to the forecast for that grid. And that's how you get down, right down to your place. So if you're just out of Gisborne here, you can click on that to New Gisborne, that's where the railway station is, and you'll get a specific forecast for that grid square. And if your farm's in that grid square, it means you're getting a forecast for your farm. Moving on quickly, you get the same result for wind when you wait for it. Waves we don't much care about unless you're a fishing type of person. This is temperature, so you can get a 3-hourly prediction, or you can get a daily maximum and daily minimum. This is good for frost. And speaking of frost, I'll zoom out here because you do get a bit of action in Queensland with frost. This is predicting, I'll just zoom on frost alone. So this is showing there's a chance of frost for a large area of southern Queensland tomorrow morning, and it gets bigger and it gets bigger, and then the sun starts to shine and it disappears again. So that's the frost forecast. It even gives you a snow forecast. So you won't expect to see much of that, but just tiny little patches of snow around Glen Innes. Rain, of course, everywhere. That's quite similar to the rain forecast. Or thunderstorms, which is quite an important feature, especially for Queensland. And you can see none for Queensland forecast tomorrow, but there's some patches around the coast of Perth where there's a chance of forecast of thunderstorms. So that's MetEye. Best thing to do with MetEye is get online and have a play and work it out. So now I'll look at this is important also. Rainfall forecasts are given as a chance of any rain. That's the chance of more than 0.2 millimetres. Or we also offer a range. So the range, to go to that first, is we're saying here, I picked this from Perth because I was looking for somewhere with some rain. This is last Wednesday. We forecast a chance of 9 to 40 millimetres of rain. There's a 75% chance you'll get 9 millimetres and a 25% you'll get chance of getting 40 millimetres. So this is covering 50% of the possible range of rainfalls, possible rainfall range. You need to remember that there's still a 25% chance you'll get less than 9 and a 25% chance you'll get more than 40. But we have to sort of draw those lines somewhere, and that's the 75 and 25 lines are where we are picking them. It's important to stress that 40 millimetres, we are not saying 40 millimetres is as much rain as you can get. If you get thunderstorms, and remember there's a forecast here for thunderstorms for Perth, you could get a lot more than 40 millimetres. That's in that residual 25%. An example of that is a week or so ago, there was a general forecast in the vicinity of whatever it was, up to say 50 millimetres of rain in the Northern Territory, but Catherine got 180 millimetres overnight because it got a storm. So you need to look at the rainfall forecast. You also need to look at the thunderstorm forecast and think about that risk. Another misapprehension we come across is people think that when we say there's a 95% chance of any rain, there's 95% chance of 9 to 40 millimetres, and it's not. That's a different thing. There's about a 50% chance of 9 to 40. Just wanted to stress that one because it's a factor that people do get wrong. That's certainly not the maximum forecast. Now let's look at the long range forecast. I'm going to do the same thing here. To find it is part of the fun. Here's our website, climate and past weather, long range forecasts, and here we are. We'll focus on rain again. You get a forecast for 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, and 3 months. There's 2 1-month forecasts and then 2 3-month forecasts. So let's focus on the long range here. So looking at July to September. This is the chance of above median. Remember, this is a map of probability, not a map of rainfall. And you can do the same. You can say, here's a location I'm familiar with, Taroom in central Queensland. Do that. Wait a little bit. I like to say that it's because the supercomputer has to turn on, but I don't think it's that. Just don't know why it takes that long. And up pops this little graph of terroon. Now remember our ensemble spread? This graph is a sort of an indication of the spread of ensembles, or the spread of ensemble members in the model. So it divides the results up into to 5 groups, which are each of them are a pair of deciles. So in this case, we're saying that there's a 66% chance in that period, 66% of our ensemble members came out as above median, which is 57.3 mils. 29 of them came out in the unusually wet category, but only 8% of them came out in the unusually dry category. So I look at this and I'm thinking terroon is probably got a fair bias towards a wetter than normal, what's the period, July to September, because there is a sort of a fair sort of a bias in those ensemble members towards the wet end of the spectrum. But sometimes you'll see that's almost flat, and you need to just take that into account. So this is not a very confident forecast. I'm going to whiz through this now. The chance of extremes. So this is the chance of unusually wet. We talked about that before. It's good news for the South Australians who have been in strife recently. And the chance of unusually dry. Again, July to September. These are the outlook scenarios. So this is a 50-50 chance of actually how much rain you will get. Or you can look at the 75% chance. That's the higher chance of you'll get this amount of rain. Or 25% is the longer, the 1 in 4 chance of getting this amount of rain. You can select. You could say, I'm going to need at least 25 millimetres of rain to get my crop in. What's the chance of that? So we zoom in, we say we're around, well, let's look at this part of the world again. It's a 90% chance it will get at least 25 mils of rain in that period. But sometimes the 3-day totals is the important thing. And you'll see the chance of that, and these only works for the 1 and 2 week period. But let's look at this. Okay, so in the second fortnight, so this is the 20th of June, the second half of June, 20th of June to the 3rd of July, there is a 20 to 40% chance that you'll get 15 mils in 3 days. But a lower chance, well, similar 20 to 40 of 25 mils, but a very low chance of getting 50 mils. So once again, let's remember that if there's one thing that I would encourage you to do, it's to pop up these graphs and hope that they work for you. Sometimes it hangs up this thing, you need to refresh it. I'm whizzing through this and confusing you all. So remember, go to your location and have a look at that spread of ensemble members and get a sense of how confident you can be in that forecast. I'll just do a contrast. Let's look at, this is a really wacky place to look at because the rainfall is very low. I don't know where Linden is, but again, you can see a stronger bias towards the wetter than normal. That's the seasonal forecast. Happy to take questions. Then the next thing I want to talk about is the very long range, my climate view. So this is a joint project between CSIRO and the Bureau. You can pick a location. Let's pick Stanthorpe. And what are we going to go at Stanthorpe? We're going to grow apples. And we view this information. So this gives us commodity-specific information that's important to apple production and compares the average over the last 20 years with the average we can expect in the 2050s. So chill accumulation, you see it's 14, these are, what do they call them, chill portions fewer. Reflects the warming climate. You explore the detail, it brings up this snappy little graph. So this is showing the past with the statistics around it. It shows there's been slightly fewer chill portions over the last 50 years, and then it predicts what the situation's going to be in the future. The point of this is, if this is about giving producers time to have a think about how they might adapt to climate change in their district. It could be, I don't know, that 55 chill portions is just fine for apple growing at Stanthorpe and there's nothing to worry about. Or it could be that it's a big deal and the response is changing varieties and stuff like that. That's not something you can do overnight. That's something that takes quite some time. But there's lots of locations and lots of commodities. And I don't really have time to go through it, but you can see that these are the commodities that are relevant to Stanthorpe. You won't find them all because we know we don't grow everything at Stanthorpe. So there's a selection of the relevant agricultural activities. So that's my climate view very quickly. You'll see it's a project that's in development, and the project team is eager for this feedback. So if you click on this feedback and say, I reckon you need to do more of this, less of that, whatever you like, say whatever you want. They're very, very keen for that feedback because that's an opportunity for them to improve the product. I think I'll finish at that because my time is up.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think you have bamboozled everyone because we don't have any questions, although I do have a question. And I asked Rachel the same question on Friday, actually, or Thursday, Friday last week, when I saw a similar version of this presentation that she did. And that is when you go to the long range forecasts and it's got the different decile bars that you showed us and there's the trend in sort of each direction. Yeah. At the top there, or on the right hand side, sorry, there's the stars, the three stars. Could you explain to the group what the relevance of the stars is and what they mean?
I will. I would have. I thought I don't have enough time, so thank you for that question, Beck. This is a reflection of the performance of the model in the past. So this is saying, in this example, at the metropolis of Lyndon, which must be up behind the Flinders Ranges, that the model has had it gets its forecast of above median rainfall in July to September. It gets it right in the past 79% of the time. That's pretty good for this sort of modelling. Picking unusually wet, it gets that right 68% of the time. But picking unusually dry, it's 61% of the time. So it's still actually pretty good, but not as good. So that's a factor. And if you look at this past accuracy, you get a map showing how well the model's performed across Australia. So this is showing that it does a pretty good job. Let's go with median here. So central New South Wales, it gets that pretty well, gets a pretty good job here in southeast Queensland as well. But there's patches where the model's not reliable at all, and that will be to do with underlying climatic variations and just the difficulty of modelling some of these things. We caution people a little bit about relying on the past performance, because that's actually not, that's sort of averaging over a long time. That's why we encourage people in this case to go to, if you live at Weir River or you're interested in Weir River, click on your location and have a look at what the model's saying here. That bias towards wet is an indication of that you can have some confidence because the ensemble members are bunched a bit towards one particular outcome. That's another factor to consider. So that's a long answer to your short question, Beck.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andrew. I believe your contact details, we can circulate your email afterwards. I was going to say, I think maybe, or that at bond.gov.au email if anybody's got any questions after the presentation that they'd like to ask.
That'll come in to Jamie, and she'll fire them out, and she'll give them all to Rachel to answer.
Lucky Rachel. All right. Well, thanks so much, Andrew. On that
I'll
note,
stop sharing.
yes, that would be great. And I think we'll pass over to Dermot, who is going to run us through some scenarios where the information that you have just provided can be used in an agronomic or farm business sense. Thanks, Dermot.
G'day, everyone. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. One sec. Okay, guys, that all come up nice and all done?
Yes, Ian's looking particularly well put together there with his in his paddock.
Okay, guys. Hi today. I'm Dermot. I'll be talking to you a little bit about the practical applications of what Andrew has just spoken about. So yeah, it's pretty simple, but you know, as farmers, you rely on the weather. You need to know what's going on. As agronomists, we often need to know what's going on as well to help you maximize your yields. So the agenda, MetEye, how can it actually help make decisions? And we've got an example for wheat, cattle, and mangoes. Following on from there, we'll just talk about long-range forecasts and how can it help you plan for stock sales or to fallow or to plant. And then we go into my climate view, just managing risk with knowledge, long-term crop rotations, and changing enterprises. So let's get stuck in. So MetEye is the 7-day forecast made into a visual representation, a map which shows the probabilities of rain, wind, temperature, humidity, UV, all the things Andrew just spoke about. Example of it, of course. So pretty much our first example is, okay, you've got plenty of fallowed moisture, the planting window is wide open, but the soil needs a top up. When can you plant? Like, when will you get that opportunity to actually get the seed in the ground? Well, you check MetEye and you know, it'll give you an indication in the next week if there's a likely opportunity. So it gives you time to decide on a variety, whether to top dress urea, pick up some seed, repair the tractor, or spray out any lingering weeds before you actually get stuck into everything. You know, if there's not rain on the horizon, you can go, okay, I actually have time to do these things, and if you've got that opportunity coming up. So the example 2 is we've got cattle, and in 3 days there's predicted to be severe thunderstorms, and the mob is in a low-lying, heavy creek flats area, and the creek is likely to flood. The heavier soils will get compacted even if it doesn't flood. So you just decide, hey, in the heavy rains, I'm going to get my cattle up to higher ground where it's just a bit safer for them. So the example 3, and you've got a full crop of mangoes is looking like a huge harvest, or this time of year, there's a higher chance of mango scale insect. You notice sap stains and think it's time to give it a spray just to nip it in the bud. But can it wait? Well, how windy will it actually be? If it's just a light breeze coming through the rows, you can probably afford to risk spraying. If it's gale force winds, though, probably should hold off. If the rest of the week is windy, spray drift will reduce efficiency. But, you know, now you know that you've got to get in earlier in the week. So long-range forecast is a vital tool for determining crop selection and managing risks. It allows the user to get the overall trends for the next 3 months. Obviously, just another example of that there. And, you know, it's come to winter, it's coming to the end of winter, your feed is running out, and, you know, with the estimates, you should make it to your green date, and then you'll get some rain, and summer growth will follow. But will rain and warmer weather be there in time? You've got a pretty big mob, what are you going to do with it? Well, you look at the long-range forecast, predicts a slow and delayed start to summer. Well, the market's good. It's probably a good opportunity to start destocking your non-essential parts of the herd. So maybe rain is on the horizon, maybe not. How will this improve your pastures? Nothing is certain, but now you can make a judgment based off probability of when you'll get rain and the growth you'll probably get from it. Example 2, you know, fallow or to plant. It's been a slow start to the season. You're going to plant corn, but you don't really have a full profile. Is it best to leave those paddocks fallow to winter? Will you get enough rain for later, less moisture-intensive crops? What are the per ton prices of mung bean and sorghum looking like? So overall, you can look at this and go, okay, Queensland, Northern New South Wales looking at 70% above median rain for July to September. Indicates a strong winter season, gives you the confidence to buy fertilizer while it's cheaper because there will be opportunities to spread it and actually get it soaked into the ground rather than just letting it all go into the atmosphere. So my climate view is the last tool we'll be looking at, and this is the cumulative meteorological information tailored for farmers. Now, it allows for a region and crop selection to determine likelihoods, like we just had Andrew explain. Another example of what it's looking there, that's for the Goondiwindi region for chickpeas. Overall, crop rotations can be a bit tricky. It's a challenge when you're going from winter to winter, determining what's going next in your rotation. It's even more of a challenge changing over to summer. Like that's where the real art comes in. But, what are the crop requirements? How much do I need in the fallow? How much can I expect to fall on it? Is there enough time to accumulate the moisture? Do I have a chance to risk new crops? Well, here we go, back to the chickpeas. Overall, look, it's gonna, in the growing season rainfall, 201 mils. That's pretty standard for, for that Goondiwindi region. Non-growing season is when you're getting the majority of your moisture. So that's gonna hit at 371 mils. So you've got to have a pretty decent fallow going to actually get a decent crop off it. And so soil moisture at sowing, 39 mils, probably not the best, probably not a great fallow there. But by comparing your own climate against my climate view, you can see trends in base risk off averages. These numbers of the Goondiwindi region to be growing chickpeas, and the risk of heat damage during flowering will be 1.5 times more likely by 2050, but it'll be half as likely to get frost damage during flowering. So what we can say about this is chickpeas, out of all the legumes, can handle heat a bit better, but overall it's still pretty damaging to them. So if you're going to be increasing your heat damage by 1.5 times by 2050, maybe you should be looking at more heat tolerant crops. Now, is this viable? You should probably begin selecting for more heat tolerant varieties realistically. But yet again, that's down the line. But as those years come and you get those climatic variation, you'll begin to notice that you need to have plants that are adapted to abiotic stress. So example 2, now this is changing enterprises. After decades of farming, you think you should diversify your enterprises. Grain farming, wheat, sorghum, and the occasional legumes. How would my region go for cotton? What about cattle? Is sheep a better option? So this tool allows you to look at these options and see what will be less risky in your region. So here we have on the left, we have sheep, low rainfall, and beef in the northern portion. So overall, it's looking like, based off the climate data, sheep are easy to raise around Goondiwindi. They're less susceptible to heat waves experienced in this region, and this region has few enough cold days at lambing. Predictions show the outlook for cattle will get worse by 2050. For sheep, however, heat waves affect fertility may be a factor. So you need to take that into consideration. But you're going to have heat-stressed cattle a lot more commonly by 2050. So maybe running sheep is a bit of a better option. But what are your broadacre options? Will it be worth it to try cotton over sorghum, which is going to be more reliable in the future? So there we have our sorghum on the left and cotton on the right. So the cotton is obviously needs far more rain, wet days at harvest, there, monthly rainfall, hot days at flowering, and heat stress days. These are things that we need to take into account. As you can see, they both get they increase over time by 2050. So it'll be needed to take into account. So do you think you can employ these tools on your farm to make better decisions? And what difference will knowing make to you? So I'd love to know that. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy for you to just jump up and ask me.
Thanks, Dermot. We do have one question from Ewan. Now, I believe Ewan works in the My Climate View team, or has had a fair bit to do with the tool. He's asked, do you discuss My Climate View with growers? Have you encountered any challenges, and what value do growers see? I guess that's a question to Ian and Andrew as well.
Would you like to jump in that one, Mossy, or happy for me to take it?
You go. I'd be interested in Andrew's thoughts as well. Yeah.
I actually haven't had the opportunity to discuss it much with growers. I would, so that's kind of answers that. But if I were to do it, I would probably have a look at it and be like, we need to start looking at what genotypes of different crops you've got. Ones that'll be more heat and drought resistant for areas like Goondiwindi, or if you're down, I live down south in Victoria, so I'd be looking for ones that can cop harsher frosts down here more often. Things like that. So that would be a really useful tool to be like, hey, we just need to be on the ball with this, because these, obviously it's like, oh, by 2050, that seems like a long way away. But these issues will start to kind of creep in year by year, and you'll have just, yield reductions because of that over time. So while I haven't really discussed it with my growers, I would in future, yeah, after looking into this a lot more, I think that I would be using it a lot more.
Yeah, good answer. It's also, it's obviously context and enterprise and location specific, but and it's not just about rainfall, of course, there's all those other metrics. But that can be really important in your long-term planning. The changing enterprises, or what crops or what species or what varieties. They're all really important decisions. What do you hear, Andrew?
I don't mix with farmers in the same way as you do, Ian. So at my end of it, the challenges we see are, I guess, linking the long term to the short term. We know that producers everywhere, there's a huge issue ahead of them. How do I get through the next season? So perhaps getting people to think about what's going to be happening in 20, 30, 40 years ahead is a bit more difficult. So we need to make those connections to make sure that it's presented in a way that's relevant to the needs of producers. So these sessions are important for that, to get that sort of feedback, and that's why I stressed the importance, if you are interested in it, of giving the team feedback through the button on the website.
Thanks, Andrew. Dermot, you mentioned on an early slide that you had about the wind at the sprays and making a decision about whether to spray or whether to not spray. So insecticides is one thing, but in terms of inputs and the way that weather and climate and forecasting can work with other types of inputs like nitrogen budgets, those sorts of things, what kind of difference, I guess, is the difference between making an informed decision or and having that right information in terms of forecasting, or just kind of going off what you think you might know?
In general, a huge difference if you're going to be out there spraying, and yet again, there's the great the wand inversion towers. That's a great tool to determine if spray drift is going to be an issue. But if you're going out there and spraying and you're getting quite a lot of drift, just think of thousands of dollars is just being literally floating away. And if you're having to do another pass later in the week because you didn't get a knockdown effect on the insects, or things didn't green up quite the way you wanted to if you're doing foliar urea, that's just, you've pretty much just doubled the cost of that spray. And then you have the associated costs of running machinery as well as fuel, all these other hidden ones. So and definitely with the way both the global economy and farming is going, people will need to start tightening up on their input budgets. That's a big thing that we see all the time. So I think that knowing that you're getting the maximum efficiency, I think that's worth quite a lot to the farmer.
Yeah, definitely. If I could chip in, and I think it raises a really good point, Beck. There's no shortage of information, tools, technology, and everything. I think, and it wasn't that long ago. Well, it depends on how old you are. Where trusted advisors used to be the source of information, but now you ask anyone, it's all information overload. People are looking for the interpretation of the information that's out there. And I guess that's where our role comes in a little bit. And I'm just as guilty as everyone about the 95% chance at 9 to 40 mils. Like, interpretation is really important. So I guess we try and work with farmers, or try and separate out the data and observations from the interpretations, from the decisions and the recommendations. And when we sit down with farmers, we try to understand what are the decisions that are important to you, and what are the measures or the metrics or the things that that make up that, and that knowing ahead of time would make a difference. And that input costs, growing costs, rotation, all these things are farmers have to take all of these things into consideration. So yeah, cost of nitrogen and all of those things, for sure.
Thank you very much. Well, it doesn't seem that we've got any other questions. But Ian and Dermot, likewise with Andrew, we will make sure we circulate your contact details to the participant list if you guys are happy for us to do that. And I'm sure that people can reach out to ask any questions should they pop into their head post-event.
Sounds
Awesome.
good. Thank you so much, guys.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. We genuinely hope that you got something valuable out of today's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Beck. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, mate.